Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Boston-Raleigh channel. We are back with more epic history. We're gonna watch The Road to Rebellion, American history, American Revolution stuff. We're watching it. It's gonna be great. I'm very happy that there's going to be an entire series on this channel where I get to I get to be entirely rock solid hard the entire time I'm watching this, because that's not a lot of content that I can put on this channel that would do that to me. But we're gonna be doing this. All right, here we go.
1763.
Yep.
The 7 Years' War, a global conflict fought by European powers, is at an end.
So it would be worth noting that that is an entirely different discussion. Although it is fun to look at the maps, right? Europe's maps changed a lot over a very short period of time. This is pre-Napoleonic Wars. So the Habsburg Empire included the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which they make a little bit of a line difference here. You have a little bit of a linear curve there to it. If you can see the difference in the different purple blue. They've got the HRE part of the Habsburg Empire, Holy Roman Empire pieces that are interlocked with Prussia. Then you have the Habsburg Austro-Hungarian Empire that has a whole lot of that, and then you have you got Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland all kind of look like Finland was a part of Sweden, I think, at the time. They all look kind of similar to the way they are today. Britain, Ireland, etc. Portugal, Spain, France. Now you also have Italy is not one unified country. Switzerland kind of is its own little area there. You have different pieces of Italy everywhere. You got Poland, Lithuania, which is it's Poland and Lithuania, and I believe like half of Latvia, a whole bunch of Belarus, that kind of stuff. They're kind of competing with Russia for pieces of that. And then the Ottoman Empire that has pieces of Ukraine, all of Anatolia, aka Turkey, a whole bunch of the Balkan states. It's a weird one. It's a weird one. You got Persia, still called Persia. I can see the Eurasian steppe nomads, which really aren't, I guess, a unified nation, but a whole lot of differences. There's like 12 countries on the board, or countries / empires on the board right now, whereas like today you'd see like 50.
And the British Empire has emerged victorious. Dominating its French and Spanish rivals, it claims new territory in India.
Yeah, you got Bengal, like the Cincinnati Bengal. Also, just because Bengals are type of tiger, that's what it's named after. But you got all this random different like post-Persian going out east, all the stuff. Burma, Siam, Laos, Annam. Vietnam was called Annam. Apparently, Cambodia. There's so many of those different territories back in the old 1760s. You know, China even controlled, I think, more land than it does now.
The West Indies.
Yep.
And above all, North America.
There we go, baby.
France must accept the loss of nearly all its colonies. 3 million square miles of land, comparable in size to all Europe.
So this is a result of the French and Indian War. Sorry to keep pausing for context, but Rupert's Land is always funny to me, just with Rupert's Land up there above Quebec. And Rupert's Land is mostly so like you actually have the province of Quebec, but you also have all the that random territory up there. You got parts of Ottawa, you got parts of the Northwest Territories. You got parts of different things. You got all kinds of crap, but then you have the colonies, and the different colonies there. You don't even have the full shapes, right? Georgia is not even full Georgia. South Carolina basically is South Carolina. North Carolina kind of like trails off a little. You don't even have the full piece of that. Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, New York. Maine was still a part of Massachusetts, etc. Vermont was not its own country yet. All kinds of fun things out there. You got all this Indian territory that's now the Midwest. So much. And then Louisiana. I wonder who owns Louisiana. I know who owns
The British
Louisiana.
now rule an empire on which the sun never sets.
Right.
But in victory, the seeds of future conflict are sown.
You can't have that big of an empire forever, can you?
The enormous cost of the war has ballooned Britain's national debt. Interest payments alone consume more than half its annual spending.
So there's a lot to break down here because the French and Indian War is something I think no one talks about outside of history. No one references it, but it's one of the more like... That is a very monumental war. It gave Britain so much out in the United States. Like that whole map, that's all theirs because of that war. The French and Indian War, they stacked up a ton of debt. So they might have wanted to, levy some taxes to pay off some of that debt. And whose territory had they expanded by doing that? I mean, it is theirs, but the people living there, they don't have any say, but they're gonna get taxed a little bit. Calculated share of UK GDP. Good grief, 2.6 trillion. That doesn't seem like a whole lot. It just doesn't, because of what you see today. 2.6 trillion in debt is kind of annoying, but it's not that bad.
And the vast new territories in America will need defending from bitter imperial rivals who will look for any chance to reverse Britain's gains. Native American tribes also pose a threat, especially those that are former allies of the French. In 1763, Chief Pontiac of the Odawa leads a revolt against the British.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Native Americans are revolting, which is not it's not a good sentiment to have. I might get canceled for saying that. They're not actually stinky, but they were revolting against the Brits. See all that Indian territory? That's like all stuff that makes up the modern Midwest today and the Rust Belt. That's kind of insane. All of that, like, just everywhere. It's a lot of land. That is a very, very, very big country, if that were its own country.
There is bloodshed along the frontier, as every British fort west of the Appalachians comes under attack. But the greatest challenge will come not from external enemies, but from the very colonies Britain seeks to protect.
Yeah! Part 1. Let's go, baby! What then is the American, this new man? He is an American who, leaving behind him all his ancient prejudices and manners, receives new ones from the new mode of life he has embraced. By Hector St. John de... Oh, God. Crevecoeur? Letters from an American Farmer.
157 years have passed since the first British colony was founded in North America.
Yeah. I hope they do some of this.
Now, there are 26 British colonies in North America and the West Indies.
I really do hope they go over like westward conquest from Europe into the Americas. That would be a really fun series to watch. Epic History do that if you haven't already somehow, and I just have overlooked it.
13 of these lie along America's eastern seaboard, where after years of prosperity and immigration, the population has passed 2 million.
Yeah. Oh man, because America's population during the colonial era in the early 1800s was basically doubling every 15 to 20 years. Like we just kind of shot up in number of people. It's like certain parts of the world today that are incredibly impoverished, but it's because of the great adventure and hardship that they face there, which is significantly less than they have in Africa and the Middle East and places like that where the population's shooting up right now. They had so much to do, so much to conquer, and so much ass to grab after you're done conquering. You'd have nice big families, that kind of good stuff.
Arguably, there is more that divides these 13 colonies than unites them. Each has its own distinct character, history, and form of government.
Oh, so this is a really good explanation of these things, because as you would say, like, these three different groups, they are much more similar to England independently of each other than they are to each other in a way. So you have New England, like the 6 states, well, 4-ish states of New England, because Massachusetts still kind of owned a Maine. Vermont wasn't really its own thing yet. It was still kind of I believe at this point it wasn't yet a republic, but then it became a republic, and then the 14th state. You had essentially Maine, Massachusetts combined, the Massachusetts Bay Colony. You had New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Plymouth Plantations. That's the name of the whole state. And then Connecticut. Those 4 states made up all of New England, and those were very, very interesting in their own way. They had their own separate, their own sway of civilization. That's where I come from. My homeland. My motherland, New England. Even though I don't live there anymore, for now. Middle colonies. We got Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. In some ways, you might say Maryland and Delaware, but I'm not 100% where they sort those kind of depends on who you're asking. But New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, those were really big. Those had a lot of people in them. They have a lot of people in them today still. Those were its own different faction. You had William Penn and all the different specifically Pennsylvanian things that were going on. You had New York and New Jersey. New York City was established by the Dutch, which was a very, very mild point in American history where the Dutch really kind of had any major influence that wasn't just lasting throughout their ongoing city. All that stuff. The good New York Brooklyn accent. I'm not going to try and do a Brooklyn accent. Just listen to the scout from Team Fortress 2.
Several were founded by those seeking religious freedom in the New World.
Yeah. Ooh, wait, we got a religious table. Guys, I'll read this for you since my head is blocking half of it. New Hampshire, separatist. Massachusetts, Puritan. These are 2 different religious foundations. Rhode Island, separatist / Baptist. I don't know what a separatist is specifically, but I kind of can infer what all that is. Connecticut, Congregationalist. Who the fuck knows what that means? New York, Dutch Reformed. New Jersey, mixed, of course. Pennsylvania, Quaker. See, Pennsylvania is very different. Like the Dutch Reformed, the Quaker, and then the sort of mixedness in New Jersey. That is its own separate thing. Whereas you have the very puritanical, you have a lot of the separatist, Baptist, Congregationalist, I assume are all within that Puritan spectrum in New England. You have all these different things. Delaware, you got Lutheran. Maryland, Roman Catholic. Those are very much the old church, the establishment old church, which is why I'm kind of I'm not 100% sure whether or not they consider them part of the middle states or the southern states in this analogy. But I'm assuming the middle states with their Delaware and Maryland, just because of that table, it kind of gives you an idea. You have sort of a more New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York air to you by having Dutch / that kind of stuff versus, well, actually, you know what? Okay, so Delaware being Lutheran, which is Martin Luther's breakaway initial Protestantism. Maryland, Roman Catholic, obviously the old church. Ironically, Maryland is my least favorite state out of all of these today, currently. If I were to go through all the 13 colonies, Maryland is definitively, in modern times, my least favorite of those states. But it's funny, because that's kind of, so funny how life works like that. Roman Catholic, I think that might actually be closer to the southern states then, because you have Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia all being Church of England, because those are all very, very English Tory colonies. Whereas all the other ones were a little bit more separational factions in religion. So I'm actually going to go back and assume Maryland, Delaware sits with Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia as the southern states, as the quote-unquote American South Mason-Dixon line goes through Maryland and Pennsylvania, so that's kind of the dividing line anyway. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York being the middle colonies in this regard, and New England being the New England ones. But what is funny, actually, because a lot of people might look at the East Coast of the United States and say, oh, it kind of just seems like the middle states are the northern states. But you really have, a separation of culture. But you also have to consider that Canada, that stuff, that's really big. So it really does feel like the middle in that sense.
Puritans who settled Massachusetts.
Yep.
The Catholics of Maryland.
Yep.
And Quakers of Pennsylvania.
Those are very separate factions.
Each colony has its share of rugged pioneers and economic opportunists, enticed by promises of plentiful land. But there are also many who arrive destitute, desperate, or against their will.
You know, America is the land of opportunity. Back in the Gilded Age, we had so much economic boom. America was the American dream, land of opportunity to all the people in Europe coming over. But back then, it was more so either you were desperate or you weren't there of your own volition. But somehow the people there made it work. You know, that's I think that's more characteristic of the American spirit than, in a sense, a lot of the sort of like the shining city on a hill outlook that people had towards the country, because we had already built the country. By the time the Reconstruction Gilded Age came around, the 1870s to the 1920s, all that immigration happened. We'd already established, reaffirmed, and cemented this nation over the course of maybe 250 years in most parts. It's very different than just saying, oh yay, land of opportunity. A lot of people had to make it that way. This was built on the backs of many hardworking people. And I think people really take that for granted now, especially with the liberalization of the conversation of what it means to be an American.
Slavery is legal in all 13 colonies.
Sort of, hold on. We got another table, slavery in the 13 colonies. Yeah. So here's the rundown. Georgia, about 50-50, 12,750 free peoples and 10,625 slaves, according to the 1770 population by the U.S. Census Bureau. So it's also kind of interesting, Georgia's only got like 22,000 people at that point. South Carolina, 49,000 free, 75,000 slaves. See, more slave than free. 50-50 in Georgia, far more slave than free in South Carolina. North Carolina, a little bit less, 127.6 and 69.6 thousand respectively. That's about half slave, or like a 1/3 slave, 2/3 free. Virginia, somewhat similar. It's like 40% slave, 60 free. You got 259,000 people and 187,000 people slave. Maryland, 138 free, 63 slave. Maryland was far more than 2/3 free. Delaware, 33,000.6 slave or free people and less than 2,000 slaves. Delaware, almost no slaves. Pennsylvania, same thing. 234,000 free men. 5,761 slaves. That's almost no slaves by population percentage. New Jersey, same thing. 109 free, 8 slave. New York, 143.8 free, 19.1 slave. It's a little bit more New York and New Jersey, but not by much. It's still like well below 20%, if not well below 10% in New Jersey, I think. Connecticut, 178 free, 5.6 thousand slave, or 5.7 thousand basically. That's not a lot. See, what you have is those states in which slavery existed in a lot of the states north of Maryland, pretty much. Well, with Delaware being a very free state relative, but Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, they all had a lot of slaves. And I'm blocking the population table, but you're gonna have to trust me, or go back and watch Epic History's video, because I'm gonna overanalyze the shit out of this, because I know so much more about this than I do about China. In New England, basically none, right? New Hampshire, live free or die. 61,742 freemen, 654 slaves. It's not even 1%. Well, okay, I guess it's slightly more than 1. It's like 1.2% slave. In 1770, before the Constitution, before the Revolutionary War, 1770, that's insane. That is insanely low. Very indicative of how New Hampshire is attitude-wise. Massachusetts, very similar. We got 2% slaves in Massachusetts. 230,000 freemen, 4,754 slaves. Insane. Rhode Island, a little bit more, right? Like Connecticut and Rhode Island are a little bit more. 54,000 to 3.7 thousand, and that's about where it all ends. Like, none of those states even have anywhere close to 10%. New Hampshire and Massachusetts are like 1 and 2% respectively. With Massachusetts definitely including Maine at the time, aka Massachusetts Bay Colony, very different from the modern state of, or Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but still, holy shit, guys, there's a lot of slaves down south. That's more than half their population, or roughly half their population in all the states. South Carolina, there are more slaves than free people. But it's very, very indicative of the plantation lifestyle you had, where slavery was a big deal, versus the merchant class you had in New England. All of the small villages, very church heavy, very much faith adherent in New England. Down south, it was a lot of more British attitude, like standard British attitude. You had a lot of Church of England people. They just kind of did what they were used to doing. And at that point in time, about 200 years after the Catholic Church lost a lot to Protestantism, you saw slavery explode in that period of time with travel to the New World, America, North America, South America, etc. There's so many things to break down, and I don't think I want to get into all of it because we're only 4 minutes into this video. So.
In the north, enslaved Africans are a small minority, about 5% of the population. But in the south...
I mean, they have the percentages, so I'm correct. 1 in New Hampshire, 2 in Massachusetts, 6.5 in Rhode Island. It's a little bit more, I guess, but Plymouth, Rhode Island... What was it? Rhode Island and Plymouth Plantation? It's the full name of the state of Rhode Island is very long. Someone could correct me in the comments, I'm sure. And I'm from... When I was a small child, I lived, like, within spitting distance of Rhode Island, so it's funny. Connecticut 3.1, New York 11.7, New Jersey 7, Pennsylvania 2.4, and Delaware 5.2. Yeah, those are all really minute. Like, New York is the only state where slavery is even a real factor in daily life.
The economy is dominated by slave plantations that grow rice, tobacco, and indigo.
Indigo? It's weird because indigo is not the kind of thing you think of when it comes to, like, eating food and stuff like that. But Maryland, right? Maryland is similar to New York, right? You got 11% in New York, Maryland 9.2, and then the big ones.
In Virginia,
oh wait,
African
I paused it too soon.
Slaves make up around 40% of the population.
Oh yeah.
In South
Look
Carolina,
at those numbers.
60%.
It just there's such a contrast. And when historians broad brushstroke America as a slavery country at this point in time, you do really have to understand what the rest of the world looked like, the Islamic world especially at the time, what the American South, they're just so slavery laden. It's not even funny. I mean, that's like, you have just entire swaths of the population that are not free. In South Carolina, it's 60.5.
Early settlers had been overwhelmingly from England. But in recent decades, the picture has begun to change, with more immigrants from Ireland, Scotland, and Germany.
We have a ton here. Another table, and I'm going to go through this again. 1700 to 1775. So there was a shift over that period of time as America started to fill out a little bit more. It wasn't just very sparse people. Like, this is like 1770, there were 2 million Americans, right? 1700, nowhere close to that. As I've said, population doubled about every 15 to 100 years. Or it's 15 to 20 years. English people, pretty much all English people, like 80% English. This is not even white. This is specifically English, the Anglos, in 1700. 1775, that was down to about half. African slavery doubled, but that wasn't even the big deal. The really big deal was all of the other immigration that happened. You had the Scots-Irish, 8%, German, 7%, Scottish, 6.6%, which Scots-Irish and German were basically non-existent, and Scottish and Dutch were nothing. The Dutch actually fell by this point in time because the Dutch established the New York colony, but they didn't really, like, keep filling in the way that the rest... I mean, the Netherlands is such a small country. You weren't going to fill in with anything anyway. French, Swedish, and other increased a lot, but other is always a weird number, right? Not a lot of French and Swedes,
all
though.
have helped to shape a new American culture, which makes a sharp impression on visitors. It is less deferential, more enterprising, increasingly self-confident.
Yeah,
Old
self-sufficient.
ties with the motherland are not what they used to be.
Nope.
For most of their history, the relationship between the British government and its American colonies has been one of salutary neglect.
loose enforcement
The
of laws and
colonies had
regulations.
been largely left to manage their own affairs.
I mean, you really can't try to manage that behemoth of the 13 colonies from little old England. You're gonna have to have mostly self-governance. All the colonies had their own governance that they, what would be the right word? This is the way England does things still today a little bit. They kind of give a lot of their lands self-governance in the sense of we're not gonna be blamed for when things go wrong. You guys get that blame. We're not really gonna take too much from you. They're not levying a whole lot of taxes. It's just that you're within our purview and our empire. We have good trade relations. We can still encroach on you as a kingdom whenever we feel like it. It's just that we'd prefer not to take the negative, so we'll kind of let you do whatever you want to do. And that really let the colonies boom.
While Britain focused on more lucrative possessions in the West Indies and India.
Caribbean was such a better deal for them.
But this is about to change. Britain faces an extraordinary debt crisis, and many expect the colonies to help meet the cost of their own defense.
Right. So this is actually the big narrative. Is if you talk to someone from Britain, you might be surprised to figure out that that's the general sentiment. Like when you learn history and they learn history, you're both learning it from different sides of the pond and different sides of the conflict. When it comes to Revolutionary War history here, or Rebellion War, I don't know what they call it there. Actually, the American War for Independence is what we call it, or the Revolutionary War. They probably call it something else. They might actually call it the American War for Independence. I don't know. They're very cucked in Britain now, so I wouldn't be surprised if they just took on our characteristics of it. But the idea was they spent a lot of money defending the colonies in the French and Indian War. I do understand that. However, that's the price to do in business. You get like zero tariff, excellent trade. You get to set up anything you want in the colonies that you need, and you get direct access to the Caribbean that's growing all kinds of extremely lucrative crops. I think that it makes sense that the British were mad that we weren't paying our fair share, but they should have just stuck with it, eaten it, kept on and carried on, because it was not worth stroking the fire over that. They just weren't happy. And they didn't like working very hard, so they wanted to kind of just, they wanted to levy their way out of the problem. They wanted to just levy taxes, and that's not how things work.
It seems a reasonable expectation.
Unfortunately, America today is a lot worse off than they were under Britain in that time period. But I mean, you didn't have any of the rights, but economically speaking, you weren't being taxed almost anything. Even when they tried to impose their taxes, they weren't very big.
The average American's tax burden is a fraction of that paid by the average Briton.
I feel bad for pausing it so much because I'm just explaining what they're going to try to explain first. Because again, when you have this is maybe one of the things on Epic History's channel that I know absolutely the most in depth about. And I'm going to be a little bit annoying probably because of that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. Let me know in the comments if I'm being annoying.
By one calculation, a Briton pays 26 shillings a year in tax. A New Englander, 1 shilling.
Right.
But it is the
almost
manner
no taxes
in which the British government goes about raising taxes that will put it and the colonies on a collision course.
If America looks to Great Britain for protection, she must enable us to protect her. If she expects our fleet, she must assist our revenue. Edmund Burke, Member of Parliament, February 1765. Exactly.
British Prime Minister George Grenville is determined to fix the country's spiralling debt crisis. He believes new colonial taxes must be part of the solution. In 1764, he proposes 2 new revenue-raising measures. A Sugar Act, which actually lowers the tax on foreign sugar and molasses, but only as part of a determined effort to ensure more effective collection.
We got the Sugar Act, which reduced molasses taxes, but expanded taxes in every other regard, and of course had, like, They actually penalized people when they didn't do what they wanted them to do. They took a bit of an authoritarian foot in the door.
And a Stamp Act, which will tax all commercial and legal documents, from newspapers and playing cards to attorneys' licenses and land grants.
Does your item of substance exist on some form of document, paper, or even a playing card? Taxes on playing cards, the Stamp Act, any kind of paper, we're gonna tax the hell out of that. Can you imagine in America today if that was like the Stamp Act was the primary one everyone was mad about? Obviously, that's the one. That's the big one. The Stamp Act of 1765. That's the one. That's the primary thing pointed at. It's a tax. It's not even that big. It's on paper products of any kind. Not like disposable paper products, but anything of any merit or substance, right? Any form of document. Well, actually, no. I think it might have been on paper. It says tax on paper products. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was primarily just for anything to do with like written paper and not like, I don't know. Did they use toilet paper? I don't know. I don't know if they use disposable paper items. We have a very different world today. I don't know if they actually did that, but anything to do with documentation, anything to do with the written word, stamp tax.
These relatively minor taxes are not expected to cause much fuss. Englishmen have been paying them for 70 years. But to the surprise of the British government, the reaction in the colonies is uproar. The Stamp Act particularly hits merchants, lawyers and business owners, the most articulate and influential members of colonial society.
Of course, when you attack, there's these people. They're obscenely competent and extraordinary men in their own right. Within the British Empire at that point, they were some of the best, right? It wasn't just like British-controlled India. These are some of the best men from Western Europe who ever existed, really. And this is kind of the thing. You had extremely competent people, and you kicked the hornet's nest, man. You just gotta tax people. That's what you did, and this is what happens.
They condemn the measures in newspapers and a flood of pamphlets.
This tax will deprive us of all our invaluable rights and privileges. It will drain us suddenly of our cash, occasion an entire stagnation of trade, discourage every kind of industry, and involve us in the most abject slavery.
Yup.
Opposition focuses less on the financial burden than on the principle of consent. Americans protest that they have no representation in the British Parliament and can accept no taxation without representation.
Now, this is one of the most American sentiments of all time, and I think this is the kind of thing that is more respectable. There's a lot of arguments from malfeasant parts of the American country that will make a big stink about taxation without representation, but it never applies equally. If you have people who don't pay any taxes, they still get to vote. But if you have people like they make a big deal about Washington D.C. because they don't have senators and their representative doesn't vote in Congress. They're just a delegate that sort of shadows the rest of Congress. If you just made them a voting member of Congress, I don't see any reason to complain. But because they're not represented in the U.S. Senate, D.C., they make an argument. They make a stink about this all the time. D.C. wasn't meant for that. There's a lot of that stuff. But it only comes... there's only taxation without representation as an argument in regards to D.C. The rest of the American diaspora of ideas would all say that the fact that we pay people money from the government, not even that they don't pay taxes, but we pay them in all sorts of services and things like that, like completely pay for people's lives. This is not the same thing. We pay for the vast majority of Americans in some way, shape, or form from tax dollars, but they get representative democracy within the country. In this scenario, you have a bunch of colonists who do everything self-sufficiently, but are being badgered by Britain. Very, very different story. Very different scenario.
It is their rights as British subjects, they point out, rights protected by the British Constitution, that are being trampled on.
Indeed.
Prime Minister George Grenville argues the American colonies have virtual representation in Parliament. That is...
They had a Zoom call. Virtual representation? How does that MP speak for the interest of all British subjects? But you don't... See, this is the thing, is that Britain was a democratic constitutional monarchy. A very mixed standard of government here. But if the MPs aren't voted on by the colonists, then I don't see how they're representative of them at the very least. That he's arguing for virtual representation because, well, I mean, we just represent Britain, right? So that's good enough. That's a terrible argument.
Their interests are represented in a general way by all British MPs. After all, even most Britons don't have the right to vote in a general election.
Right.
Grenville's argument does not win many backers, even in Parliament itself, where...
Well, and this is something I really should express to the audience here. When you have people that don't all vote, right? Americans didn't all vote when they got the right to vote. Usually, effectively speaking, the head of household, adult men who own property, voted. That was the standard. Obviously, there were going to be all the racial arguments and everything like that, but as a general rule for society, adults who own property, adult males who own property voted. Their interests were the interests of their family units or their businesses and things like that. At that point, you had enough representation to be able to say that these people can make sound decisions when deciding who to elect to lead the government, to make votes for them on the daily that they can't. It makes a lot more sense in that way than just saying, oh, well, most people don't vote anyway, so it's not really representative. I don't think that bears out. I don't think that anyone back then would have really said that it wasn't reasonable, because you have local priorities. You have extremely localized priorities within households, within neighborhoods, things like that. You have things that people can make their voices heard by just simply backing the people who are there, right? You don't have to have every single man, woman, and child voting for something to be representative. So I think that this argument's even less ideal, given that people back then just they did what was best in regards to how they thought that they should have a family, have a business, take care of things anyway, so they'd be the ones making that decision. It's not strange. This is the norm for all of human history. And it's not like there's a lack of liberty. Early America was the most liberty-laden for white Americans that any society has ever been for anybody.
Electoral reform is a fierce battleground.
There is an idea, in some, that the colonies are virtually represented in the House. I would fain know by whom an American is represented here. Is he represented by any knight of the Shire in any county in this kingdom? Or will you tell him that he is represented by any representative of a borough? A borough which perhaps its own representatives never saw. This is what is called the rotten part of the Constitution. It cannot continue a century.
And that's such a funny thing, because as you might know, in America, we have a lot of people who don't really represent the districts that they represent. So it's hard to see that when it's not, you need something ground up. It can't be top down. And I think that that's what America has been about in regards to democracies. The big complaint, when you have top down control, even if it's supposed to be representative of the people, it never really is. You need standard at the very ground level, bottom up control. That's how society is built ideally. You have people who can build their business from the ground up. You have people who can build their states, their villages, their towns from the ground up. You have people, in a sense, who can diversely build a city from the ground up. And then you can extend that to counties, states, and then the whole country. But if you don't have people from the ground level making those decisions, it's not that representative, right? Our members of the House of Representatives today, they represent on average about 800,000 Americans per district. Almost none of those people are actually representative of those people. And that I think is why we have the federalist system where we have 50 states. Those states used to have their own legislative bodies elect representatives to the Senate. You had the House being what it was, and I do think that there is a lot of merit to the argument that there should be more House members, but I feel like you still have the same problem if it's not at the granular level that you have at the states.
The Speaker is Pitt the Elder, a renowned former Prime Minister.
William Pitt.
That this kingdom has no right to lay a tax upon the colonies.
Oh, that was the whole quote. This kingdom has no right to lay tax upon the colonies. It's funny. Yeah, there were a lot of people in Britain who didn't like the fact that they were... I mean, it's like today. We don't like it when we're overextending ourselves. We'd prefer to just deal with local problems. And I think that a lot of people don't quite understand. We don't really care that much about the... We're not unsympathetic to the plight of other countries, but we're not that interested in maintaining that control when it's so expensive, it's so costly, it's so exhausting. And it takes away from priorities at home. And I think that's something that is probably the most understated fact of this whole Revolutionary War. Britain really at the local level, they didn't want anything to do with it. It was not a popular war to try to reinstate in like put big boot on America was not something they really wanted to do. What greater glory can New England see than stamp men hanging from a tree? That's inscribed on an effigy of Andrew Oliver, a tax collector. Well, that's a little radical, you know. That's how they did it. It's a little gruesome.
Throughout 1765, colonial assemblies meet to protest against the new acts. In the Virginia House of Burgesses, Patrick Henry emerges as one of the most radical leaders of colonial resistance. He proposes a series of resolutions, which are adopted by the House.
Resolved, that the first adventurers and settlers of His Majesty's colony and Dominion of Virginia brought with them all the liberties, privileges, and immunities that have at any time been held, enjoyed, and possessed by the people of Great Britain. Resolved, that the taxation of the people by themselves, or by persons chosen by themselves to represent them, is the only security against a burdensome taxation.
So you have these little ideas, you know, the resolutions here. The long and short of it, we need self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and self-determination. That's kind of the overwhelming idea here. And again, at this point, Britain didn't really feel like, at least at the citizen level, Britain didn't really feel like they wanted to spend a lot of time bogged down out here, because America, the 13 colonies, like the United States of America, that wasn't where all their money came from. It was all from the Caribbean, from the cash crops. Like, you had a few crops up here, but those plantations, I mean, Like, the Caribbean was such a lucrative part of what their society gained money from, that built things for them. Our area was almost like a penal colony in a way, like closer to Australia in the sense that they just kind of wanted the troublemakers gone. We had all these people who were very radical. They had very radical ideas built into their blood, built into their character and their spirit. These were the problem children. They didn't want them. They certainly don't want to keep trying to get them. Trying to get them back, that's insane. I mean, the French and Indian War is the thing that boggles my mind the most, because if you're gonna expand, I mean, it doesn't really boggle my mind. I understand that you'd want to beat France in the Conquest War, but it's insane to think that they spent resources, they racked up some debt fighting for the colonies, where's the direction going here? Was it always an idea that you were going to think, oh well, we have to tax the people out in America, and they probably won't be that upset about it. I mean, that's probably what they thought, is like, worst comes to worst, we can just do that, and they can still do all their own stuff, but we need to take their money, just a little bit of it, but we need to take it, and that's maybe where I'm gonna let him finish this, but we're gonna end today with all that. All right, well there you go. That's the episode today. We have gotten 10 minutes into this 30-minute video. Well, it's like a 25-minute video, but 10 minutes into this 25-minute video, and I have sucked all of the time and the air and the life out of everything with my massive America hard-on, describing literally everything in obscenely stupid detail. I don't know. Do you guys want to see more of this? Epic History is one of my favorites. I watched that whole China series. That was really good. We hate China from fake China, at least. We don't like fake China here. We like Taiwan real China, because the nationalists seem to want to have their own, they want to have something. It's not remotely similar to this. Not remotely. This is the most self-deterministic the world has ever been. But I mean, it's a very small fraction of the world. It's only the British Empire. Saying only the British Empire is insane, because they were the most relevant of the empires, at least on the ascendance. By the end of the 1800s, they were probably the primary empire, but at this point, they were still hitting way above their weight. America, very based, very America-pilled, very liberty conscious, and that's what we love on this channel. I made this channel because I love liberty. And I love the republic I live in, America. It's great. The best, some might say, the greatest. We'll end with that. Definitely be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Maybe next episode will be a little less lengthy, but have yourselves a wonderful rest of the evening. Bye-bye.